The sky above New Eden burned orange and red as another city died. Admiral Way stood on the bridge of the Indomitable and watched the feed from the planet's surface. The plasma bombs fell like rain, and where they landed nothing remained. Not buildings, not trees, not people, just glass craters where cities used to be. 17 cities destroyed, her tactical officer reported. His voice shook slightly. Estimated civilian casualties approaching 12 million. Gripped the railing in front of her so hard her knuckles turned white. Below her, on the surface of humanity's largest colony world, families were running through streets that would not exist in 5 minutes. Children were crying for parents who would never answer, and there was nothing she could do except watch and wait for the rest of the fleet to arrive. They had come without warning. Their ships had appeared at the edge of the system just 6 hours ago. They had not answered any hails. They had not made any demands. They had simply descended through the atmosphere and started killing. No one knew why. The combined Earth defense fleet arrived 3 hours later, 47 human warships against 43 vessels. The battle lasted 90 minutes. When it was over, every ship was either destroyed or disabled. 11,000 crew members survived. They were placed in containment fields throughout the fleet, waiting for someone to decide what to do with them. Walked through the corridors of her ship in a daze. 17 million dead. The number did not feel real. It was too big to understand. She had seen the feeds from the surface, the rivers of refugees fleeing burning cities, the hospitals overwhelmed with the wounded. She had heard the last transmissions from emergency workers as the plasma fire reached them. 17 million human beings, gone in a single afternoon. The Astral hierarchy contacted humanity the next day. The hierarchy was an ancient coalition of elder species who had governed this section of the galaxy for 200,000 years. Humanity had only made contact with them 15 years ago. They were still considered newcomers, barely worth noticing in the grand scheme of galactic politics. Ambassador received the transmission aboard the diplomatic vessel Olive Branch. She stood in her quarters and listened to the message from High Arbiter Han, one of the 6 beings who led the hierarchy. The species has committed an act of unprovoked genocide against a member species of the Astral hierarchy, Han said. The being was old beyond human comprehension, a creature of crystalline flesh and cold logic. By the laws that have governed this region of space for 200, there is only one acceptable response. The species must be exterminated. Every world, every colony, every individual. This is the price of genocide. This is how order is maintained. Felt her blood run cold. You want us to help you kill 9 billion. We expect you to fulfill your obligations as members of galactic civilization, Han replied. Your fleet will be assigned coordinates for the. You will participate in the cleansing. This is not negotiable. The transmission ended. Stood alone in her quarters for a long time, trying to process what she had just heard. The hierarchy wanted humanity to commit genocide in response to genocide. 9 billion lives for 17 million. That was their justice. That was how they maintained order. She transmitted the message to Earth immediately. The United Earth Council convened an emergency session. President sat at the head of the long table, surrounded by representatives from every nation on Earth. The room was silent as played the recording of Han's demands. When it finished, no one spoke for several minutes. Defense Minister was the first to break the silence. They're asking us to become monsters, he said quietly. They're not asking, corrected. They're demanding. The hierarchy has made it clear that failure to participate will have consequences. They've exterminated 47 species in their history for violating their laws. We've been members for 15 years. We're barely tolerated as it is. So we either commit genocide or face extinction ourselves, said representative from Japan. Those are our choices. The room erupted in arguments. Some demanded immediate compliance, pointing out that humanity could not survive a war with the hierarchy. Others refused to consider killing billions of innocent for the actions of their military. The debate went in circles for hours. President listened to it all. He was an old man, tired and gray, but his eyes were sharp. When the arguments finally died down, he spoke. "Has anyone asked the why they attacked us?" The room fell silent. "What do you mean?" asked. "I mean exactly what I said," leaned forward. 43 warships appeared in our system without warning and began slaughtering civilians. We have 11,000 prisoners in our custody. Has anyone bothered to ask them why? Shook his head slowly. The hierarchy didn't mention anything about motive. Their message only discussed punishment. "That's interesting, isn't it?" said. "They've governed this region of space for 200,000 years. They've exterminated 47 species. And in all that time, they never thought to ask why any of those species did what they did." "Perhaps they don't care," suggested. "Perhaps they don't," agreed. "But I think we should. Before we decide whether to help exterminate 9 billion beings, I think we should understand what drove them to attack us in the first place." Admiral received her orders 3 hours later. She was to conduct interrogations of the prisoners, starting with their commanding officer. The hierarchy was not to be informed. This was to be a purely human investigation. Walked down to the containment bay where Vessel Admiral was being held. There was a creature, nearly 3 meters tall, with a hard shell of dark chitin and compound eyes that reflected the light in unsettling ways. It hung suspended in a stasis field, unable to move but fully conscious. Stood before it and activated her translator. "I have questions," she said. The mandibles clicked. The translator rendered its words in a flat, mechanical voice. "You have come to gloat before the extermination. I understand. We would do the same." "I haven't come to gloat," said. "I've come to understand." Made a sound that might have been laughter. "Understand what? We attacked your world. We killed your people, millions of them. There is nothing to understand. We are monsters and monsters deserve to die. This is the way of things." "Why did you do it?" Went still, its compound eyes focused on with an intensity that made her skin crawl. "Why do you ask questions you already know the answer to?" "I don't know the answer," said. "That's why I'm asking." For a long moment said nothing. Then it spoke again and its voice was different, softer, broken. "You truly don't know?" "No." Its mandibles clicked rapidly and the translator struggled to keep up. "Then the hierarchy never told you. They never explained. They simply ordered our extermination and expected you to comply." "That's correct." "Of course, that is how they operate. They have done this for 200,000 years. They do not ask why. They do not care about reasons. They only care about order." His voice grew bitter. "In species like mine, we learn too late that the hierarchy's order is built on silence and blood." Stepped closer to the containment field. "Tell me why you attacked us. Help me understand." Was quiet for a long time. When it finally spoke, its words were heavy with grief. "Because we are dying, all of us, every in the galaxy. A plague is killing our species, and we had no cure, until we discovered that your neural tissue contains a protein that could save us." Felt her world tilt slightly. "What?" "We asked the hierarchy for permission to contact you, to negotiate, to trade, to beg if necessary. They refused. They said humanity was too new, too unproven. We were not permitted contact." His voice cracked. "So we made a choice, a terrible choice. We decided that 17 million human lives were acceptable if it meant saving 9 billion. The containment bay fell silent, stared at the alien before her, her mind racing. 17 million humans had died because the hierarchy had refused to let two species talk to each other. "The plague," she said slowly, "is it still killing your people?" Nodded. "Every day, every hour, children, elders, everyone." Its compound eyes dimmed. By the time your extermination fleet reaches there may be no one left to kill. Turned and walked out of the containment bay without another word. She had a report to send to Earth. The report from Admiral reached President's desk within the hour. He read it twice, then passed it to Ambassador. She read it and went pale. The hierarchy knew, she said quietly. They knew why they attacked us and they never told us. I suspect the hierarchy doesn't care about reasons, said. They've built their entire civilization on the principle that actions have consequences, and those consequences don't change based on motive. It's simpler that way. Cleaner. Simpler, shook her head. 9 billion beings are going to die because asking questions isn't convenient. Stood and walked to the window of his office. Outside, the sun was setting over the African savanna, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple. Somewhere above him, in orbit around a dying colony world, 11,000 prisoners waited to learn their fate. What do you think we should do? He asked. Considered the question carefully. The hierarchy expects us to help with the extermination. If we refuse, they'll see it as a violation of their laws. They might turn on us next. That's possible. But if we participate, his voice trailed off. If we help kill 9 billion beings who only attacked us because they were desperate and dying, and the hierarchy wouldn't let them ask for help, then we become exactly what the hierarchy wants us to be, finished. Executioners, enforcers of a system built on fear and silence. Is there another option? Was quiet for a long moment. Then he turned from the window and looked at with an expression she had never seen before. It was determination mixed with something else, something that might have been hope. I think there is, he said, but it's going to require us to do something the hierarchy has never done in 200,000 years of galactic rule. What's that? Show mercy. The word hung in the air between them, strange and unfamiliar in the context of galactic politics. The hierarchy dealt in absolutes, order and chaos, compliance and extermination. There was no room in their system for mercy, no space for understanding or forgiveness. But humanity was new to this galaxy. They had not yet learned to think like the elder species. They still remembered what it meant to be small and afraid, to make desperate choices when all other options were gone. They still believed that enemies could become allies, that hatred could give way to understanding, that the cycle of violence could be broken. The hierarchy will never accept it, said. Then we'll have to show them they're wrong, replied, or die trying. He reached for his communications console and opened a channel to Admiral. Admiral, he said, I have new orders for you. I need you to ask Vessel Admiral a question. His voice came back, tired but alert. What question, sir? Took a deep breath. The next words out of his mouth would change the course of galactic history. He knew that. He also knew that he had no other choice, not if he wanted to remain human. Ask them if they still need the cure. Admiral walked back to the containment bay slowly, her mind full of conflicting thoughts. 17 million of her people were dead. She had seen the feeds from New Eden, watched cities vanish in pillars of fire, listened to the last transmissions of emergency workers as the plasma bombs reached them. Part of her wanted vengeance. Part of her wanted to see them suffer for what they had done. But another part of her remembered why she had joined the military in the first place. Not to kill, but to protect. Not to destroy, but to defend. She had spent her entire career believing that humanity was better than this, that they could face the darkness of the universe without becoming dark themselves. Now she had a chance to prove it. Was still suspended in the stasis field when she arrived. Its compound eyes tracked her approach with something that might have been curiosity or fear. You have returned, it said. I have stepped closer to the field. I have a question for you. Another question. Your species is strange. The hierarchy would not ask questions. They would simply kill us and be done with it. We're not the hierarchy. Met the alien's gaze directly. I've read your report, I know about the plague, I know why you attacked us, and I've spoken with my government. Went very still, and what did your government say? Took a deep breath. The words she was about to speak would either save billions of lives or start an interstellar war, possibly both. They asked me to find out if you still need the cure. For a long moment, did not respond. Then it made a sound that the translator could not parse, something between a keen and a scream, a noise of raw emotion that transcended species and language. Its compound eyes flickered with patterns had never seen before. You would, his voice broke. After what we did to your people, after the millions we murdered, you would help us. Yes. Why would you do this? We are your enemies. We killed your children. We burned your cities. We deserve nothing but death. Considered the question carefully. She thought about the feeds from New Eden, the burning cities and the rivers of refugees. She thought about the faces of the dead, the 17 million lives that had been stolen by the beings before her. She thought about the rage in her heart, the hunger for vengeance that screamed at her to let the die. And then she thought about the other feeds, the ones from that the hierarchy had shared as part of their extermination briefing. She thought about the hospitals full of dying children, the mass graves being dug in every city, the desperate parents watching their families wither away one by one. 17 million humans are dead because the hierarchy decided you weren't allowed to talk to us, she said finally. I'm not going to let 17 million more die, yours or ours, because we weren't allowed to listen. Made the keening sound again and this time recognized it. It was weeping. The alien before her, the commander of the fleet that had murdered millions of her people, was crying. You are not what I expected, whispered. I'm not what the hierarchy expected either, replied. That's kind of the point. She turned to the containment controls and began entering commands. The stasis field flickered and died, dropped to the deck, its legs trembling as they took its weight for the first time in days. What are you doing? It asked. I'm releasing you, stepped back to give the alien room. You're going to work with our medical teams to develop a cure for your plague, and then you're going to help us figure out how to survive whatever the hierarchy does when they find out we refuse their orders. Stood slowly, testing its limbs. It towered over, nearly twice her height, with claws that could tear through steel and mandibles that could crush bone. But when it looked at her, there was no hostility in its eyes, only confusion and something that might have been the beginning of hope. The hierarchy will not forgive this, it said. I know. They will come for you. They will declare you enemies of galactic order. They may try to exterminate your species as they plan to exterminate mine. I know. And you're doing this anyway. Smiled, though there was no humor in it. We're doing this anyway, because that's what humans do. We make stupid, stubborn, irrational decisions based on principles that don't make any practical sense. And sometimes, against all odds, those decisions turn out to be right. Was silent for a long moment. Then it did something that would remember for the rest of her life. It folded its long limbs and lowered itself to the deck until its head was level with hers. And then it spoke in a voice that was barely above a whisper. I do not know if your decision is wise. I do not know if your species will survive what is to come. But I know this much. In 200,000 years of galactic history, no species has ever shown us mercy. You are the first. Its compound eyes gleamed with reflected light. Whatever happens next, the people will not forget this. We will not forget you. Then let's make sure we both survive long enough for that to matter, said. We have work to do. She extended her hand, a human gesture of greeting and alliance, studied it for a moment, then carefully wrapped one of its claws around her fingers. It was the first handshake in history between human and. It would not be the last. The astral hierarchy's response came exactly 3 days after humanity announced their intentions. High Arbiter Han appeared on every screen and every channel across human space, its crystalline form radiating cold fury. Ambassador watched the transmission from her quarters aboard the Olive Branch, her face carefully neutral. Humanity has chosen to violate the fundamental laws that govern this region of space, Han declared. They have refused to participate in the lawful extermination of a genocidal species. They have chosen to ally themselves with murderers. They have rejected the wisdom of the hierarchy in favor of their own primitive morality. Felt her jaw tighten, but she said nothing. Therefore, the astral hierarchy declares humanity to be in violation of the Galactic Compact. All diplomatic relations are hereby severed. All trade agreements are void. All human vessels are forbidden from entering hierarchy space. Any human found in violation of these sanctions will be detained or destroyed. The transmission paused, and Han's crystal eyes seemed to focus directly on, as if the being could somehow see through the screen. You had a chance to prove yourselves worthy members of galactic civilization. You chose instead to embrace chaos. The hierarchy does not forgive. The hierarchy does not forget. Remember this when your species faces the consequences of your actions. The screen went dark. Sat alone in the silence for several minutes. Then she opened a channel to Earth and reported to President. "We're on our own now," she said. "No," replied. "We're not, we have and something tells me they won't be the last." "What do you mean?" Smiled a tired expression on his weathered face. "The hierarchy has been ruling this section of space for 200,000 years. In all that time, they've exterminated 47 species. How many more have they threatened? How many live in fear of their judgment? How many are watching right now, wondering if there might be another way? Consider this. You think other species will join us? I think fear is a weak foundation for an empire," said. "And I think mercy is more powerful than the hierarchy realizes. We're about to find out which one of us is right." The medical teams began their work the next day. Human doctors and scientists worked alongside experts, studying the plague that had ravaged the alien species. It was challenging work. Biology was radically different from human biology, and the plague itself was unlike anything Earth scientists had ever seen. But slowly, painstakingly, they made progress. Dr. Sarah led the research team. She was a who had spent her career studying alien life forms, always from a distance, always through the lens of academic curiosity. Now she was working shoulder to shoulder with beings whose species had murdered millions of her fellow humans just days ago. It was surreal. It was also, she had to admit, the most meaningful work she had ever done. "The protein we need is found in human neural tissue," she explained to her counterpart, a scientist named. "But we don't need to harvest it from living humans. We can synthesize it in a lab." His compound eyes flickered with what was learning to recognize as surprise. "Your species would share this technology with us." "We're already sharing it," said. "That's kind of the whole point." "I do not understand your people," admitted. "We came to your world as invaders. We killed millions, and now you treat us as partners." Paused in her work and looked at the alien beside her. "Do you want to know the truth?" "Yes." "I hate what your people did. I have friends on New Eden, had friends. Some of them are dead now because of your fleet." His voice was steady, but there was pain beneath it. "If you had asked me a week ago if I could ever work alongside I would have laughed at the idea. And yet here you are." "Here I am," returned to her work, "because hate is easy. It's the simplest thing in the world to want vengeance on the people who hurt you, but it doesn't fix anything. It doesn't bring back the dead, it just creates more dead." She looked up at again. "Your people were dying. You made a terrible choice, but you made it because you were desperate. I can't forgive what you did. I don't know if I ever will, but I can try to understand it, and I can try to help you find a better way forward." Was silent for a long moment. Then it spoke in a voice so quiet the translator almost missed it. "My offspring was one of the first to die from the plague, 3 cycles ago. I watched her body fail, watched her struggle for breath, watched her compound eyes go dark. She was 7 cycles old, too young to understand why she was dying, too young to know that her death was part of a horror that would consume our entire species. Stopped working entirely. She looked at the alien before her, at the grief etched into every line of its chitin-covered face, and she felt something shift inside her chest. "I'm sorry," she said, and she meant it. "When the fleet departed for your world, I did not go with them," continued. "I am a scientist, not a warrior, but I supported the mission. I believed it was necessary. I believed we had no other choice." Its compound eyes fixed on. "I was wrong. There is always another choice. Your people have shown me that." Reached out and placed her hand on its forelimb. The chitin was hard and cool beneath her fingers, utterly unlike human skin, but the gesture meant the same thing in any language. "Then let's make sure your daughter didn't die for nothing," she said. "Let's find this cure." They worked through the night and the night after that. Within 11 weeks they had a working treatment. Within 12, the first shipments were on their way to the hierarchy's extermination fleet never launched. By the time they had finished assembling their forces, the plague was already in retreat. The people, against all odds, were going to survive. And then something unexpected happened. Vessel Admiral requested a meeting with President. It came to Earth aboard a human shuttle, escorted by human fighters, and walked into the United Nations building in Geneva to face the species it had tried to destroy. "I have come to offer," announced to the assembled council. Raised an eyebrow. "Payment for the dead. It is an ancient tradition among my people. When one family wrongs another, when blood is spilled unjustly, the offending party must make restitution." His compound eyes swept across the room. "My species has wronged yours beyond measure. 17 million of your people are dead because of us. No payment could ever be sufficient, but we must try." "What are you proposing?" asked. Knelt before the council, lowering its massive body until its head was level with the human leaders. "Every surviving crew member from my fleet volunteers for decades of service rebuilding New Eden. Our engineers will help construct new cities. Our scientists will share our technology. Our memorial keepers will learn the names of every human who died and carve them into crystal monuments that will last 10,000 years. Its voice dropped. "We cannot bring back the dead. But we can honor them, and we can try to build something worthy of their memory." The council chamber was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, President rose from his seat. He walked down from the podium and stood before a small human facing an alien giant. "Your people were dying," he said quietly. "You made a terrible choice, but you made it out of desperation and love for your children. I don't know if humanity can ever truly forgive what happened, but we can try to understand it, and we can try to build something better together." He extended his hand, wrapped its claw around his fingers, and for the second time in history, human and shook hands. This time, the entire galaxy was watching. They were the first to reach out. They were an ancient species, conquered by the hierarchy 6,000 years ago, reduced to vassals who followed orders and kept their heads down. They had watched humanity defy the hierarchy and survive. They had watched humanity show mercy to their enemies and receive loyalty in return. And they had begun to wonder if perhaps the galaxy did not have to be governed by fear. Their ambassador arrived at Earth 3 months after the cure was distributed. She was tall and willowy, with silver skin and eyes like pools of liquid gold. She knelt before President just as had done, but her words were different. "We come seeking alliance," she said. "Not as subjects of the hierarchy, but as equals. We have watched what you have done with we wish to be part of it." Studied her for a long moment. "You understand what this means. The hierarchy will see it as betrayal. They may move against you." "They have held our world in chains for 6,000 years, the ambassador replied. "We have forgotten what it means to be free. You have reminded us." Behind her, others waited. Vessels from a dozen different species, all watching, all hopping. The vessel minds, artificial intelligences who lived in quiet terror of being judged defective and deleted, whose population had been culled 3 times in living memory for crimes their ancestors had committed, species whose names humanity had never heard, whose worlds had suffered under the hierarchy's rule for. They had all seen what humanity had done. They had all watched mercy triumph over vengeance, understanding triumph over fear, and they wanted to be part of it. Within 5 years, 17 species had withdrawn from the astral hierarchy. They formed a new coalition with Earth at its center, not because humanity was the strongest, but because humanity had proven something the hierarchy had forgotten was possible. They called it the Compact of Understanding. High Arbiter Han watched these developments with cold fury. The hierarchy had ruled this region of space for 200,000 years. They had exterminated 47 species. They had crushed rebellions and ended wars. They were ancient and powerful beyond human comprehension. And now, for the first time in their history, they faced something they did not know how to fight. They could destroy humanity. They had the power. Their fleets were larger, their weapons more advanced, their experience vast beyond measure. But if they did, they would prove everything humanity had said about them. They would show the galaxy that the hierarchy ruled through nothing but fear and violence. And that was no longer enough. Other species were watching. Other species were choosing sides. And for the first time in 200, the hierarchy was not sure which side would win. On the anniversary of the New Eden attack, Ambassador stood before the first joint session of the Terran Parliament. Behind her, human and representatives sat side by side. In the gallery above, observers from a dozen other species watched in silence. 1 year ago, 43 warships entered our system and began killing our people, said. Her voice was calm, but it carried through the chamber with the weight of history. 17 million humans died in a single afternoon. By every standard of galactic law, we had the right to demand vengeance. The hierarchy expected us to join in the extermination of the species. 9 billion lives for 17 million. She paused, letting the words settle over the assembly. We refused, not because we were weak, not because we didn't grieve for our dead, but because we believed there had to be another way. We believed that understanding was stronger than hatred, that mercy was more powerful than vengeance, that the cycle of violence that had governed this galaxy for 200,000 years was not inevitable. Turned to face the delegation. Vessel Admiral sat at their head, its compound eyes fixed on her with an intensity that was almost painful. Were we right? She asked. I don't know. The hierarchy has called us naive. They have called us fools. They have threatened us with extinction if we continue down this path. She smiled slightly. And yet here we are, human and sitting together in a parliament that should not exist, building a future that no one thought was possible. She turned back to the assembly. The hierarchy taught the galaxy that order requires extinction. They were wrong. Order requires choice. It requires understanding. It requires the courage to look at your enemy and see not a monster but a being capable of change. His voice rose. Today we choose differently. Today we prove that the cycle can be broken. Today we show the galaxy that there is another way. The delegation rose in the gesture their species used for profound respect. Across 17 worlds, other species did the same. They sang an ancient song of hope. The vessel minds broadcast signals of solidarity. They raised their banners for the first time in living memory. The astral hierarchy had ruled through fear for 200. It took humanity 5 years to prove there was another way. And the galaxy would never be the same. In the memorial garden on New Eden, 17 million names were carved into crystal. Human and workers tended the garden together, planting flowers that bloomed in shades of blue and gold. Children from both species played among the monuments, their laughter echoing across the grounds where cities had once burned. Admiral visited the garden on the anniversary of the attack. She stood before the crystal wall, reading the names of the dead, remembering the day when the sky had burned orange and red. Vessel Admiral stood beside her, its compound eyes dim with something that might have been sorrow or peace or both. "Do you think they would approve?" asked quietly. "The dead, if they could see what we have built, would they understand?" Considered the question for a long time. She thought about the families who had died in the plasma fire, the children who would never grow up, the futures that had been stolen. She thought about the rage that had burned in her heart when she first learned the truth about the hierarchy. She thought about the moment when she had extended her hand to and chosen mercy over vengeance. "I think they would want us to remember them," she said finally. "And I think the best way to do that is to build something they would be proud of. A galaxy where species don't have to die because they were afraid and desperate. A galaxy where enemies can become allies. A galaxy where their deaths meant something." Made a soft sound that the translator rendered as agreement. "Then we will continue to build, for them, for us, for the future." Nodded, she placed her hand on the crystal wall, feeling the cold surface beneath her palm. 17 million names, 17 million stories, 17 million lives that had ended too soon. But their memory lived on. In the garden, in the crystal, in the alliance that humanity had forged against all odds. In the children playing among the monuments, human and together, laughing as if the war had never happened. The astral hierarchy had tried to teach the galaxy that genocide was the only answer to genocide. Humanity had proven them wrong, and in doing so, they had changed everything. The stars above New Eden shone bright and clear, scattered across the infinite darkness like promises of things to come. Looked up at them and smiled. The future was uncertain. The hierarchy was still out there, ancient and powerful and full of cold fury. But humanity was not alone anymore. They had allies. They had friends. They had proven that mercy could triumph over vengeance, that understanding could conquer fear. And that was enough. It had to be.